call to order the Monday, August 31st Finance Committee meeting. And we've received the July 2020 financials. I wonder, Patty, whether you'd like to walk us through those and help us interpret them.
Ready? The bridge fund, we'll start with that, the actual versus budget. Our bridge tolls are happily, thanks to our truck traffic, still above budget. So year to date, we've accumulated $253,000 in bridge tolls. We only budgeted $153 due to the COVID. So we are over budget there, which is good. Rental income is pretty much spot on, and the rental income here includes this building and the border station.
So this does not include the industrial park?
No, that would be on the next one.
Sure.
Other income, what I noticed when I was doing some research this morning, we've had no advertising income this year, which is part of why our other income is below budget. And of course, we have the PPP under year to date. It is coming out in the next day or two, how we actually do the loan and the forgiveness of the PPP. They're finally going to finalize the rules and regulations or whatever to do that. So that will be done shortly through a portal. The only way to do it is through a portal with the bank. So we'll be doing that soon. Our salaries and our expenses, our salaries are right on for the bridge fund. All of the benefits, I'm not certain why, but all of the payroll taxes and employee benefits are budgeted to the bridge. They were not in last year's or this year's budget, split out to the different departments. I believe that I've attempted to split them out just using percentages, and I think the percentages I've used are not correct, because I can't see how we can be $63,000 over budget in benefits and payroll taxes at this point in the year.
Could I ask a question about that?
Sure.
I looked at the payroll taxes and employee benefits under the report on the port fund, and that's under by about $56,000, and this is over by about $63,000. Is
Right.
it reasonable to assume that this is just a matter of allocation being different in the budget versus the posting?
Right. That's what I believe. When the prior CFO did the budget last year, everything went into the bridge, and I attempted to say, okay, I believe so much of it belongs here, so much of it belongs here, so much of it belongs here. I don't think I did it as well as I could have.
But it appears that the total is close to the
Is
total
close.
budgeted.
Okay.
Okay.
Our insurance expenses are a little below. Interest, because of one of the deferments, is a bit below. Our maintenance expenses, both bridge and straight, we're holding back as much as we can on doing anything extra right now, so they're well under budget. I believe our utility budget is low for the bridge. We are over budget already, and we're only 4 months in. So I believe this will only get worse as winter approaches. Our general expenses are being fueled by legal fees. Right now, our legal fees are 67% of what was budgeted for the year. So our change in net assets before depreciation for July has gone into the red. It's $64,000 in the red. overall, year-to-date, we're still positive because of the PPP. Questions on the bridge? Okay. If we go to the port, remember the port comes in 2 stages because we do each of the individual areas and then do a consolidated against budget. Passenger fares, the port, the fuel sales and fare charges for the airport are about 9%, and they should be about 33% at this point this year. So at $5,500, they're well below where they should be, but we knew that would happen with the reduced flights. The rental income for the airport is below budget. For the industrial park, it is slightly over budget for what we would expect at this point during the year. Everything else is relatively on point. The maintenance expense under expenses for the airport, we had a Collins Hammond bill for the Pappy lighting on the runway. I believe if that is finished, that should actually be transferred to fixed assets because it's an upgrade to the lighting.
It's complete.
It is, then we can move it to fixed assets.
Is that the malls that's there?
No, that's, the Pappy's is lighting on the runway 9 coming in, that it's kind of out of date and we couldn't get, but we, instead of doing the whole thing, we decided I think it was, the material cost was something like $9,000 or $10,000, then the rest was labor cost to install.
The utilities under the industrial park, even though that looks high, most of that gets, well, not most of it, but some of it gets rebilled to the tenants in the industrial park. And something that I didn't realize until recently, our solar costs are expensed only to the industrial park. And we don't take advantage of the solar at the industrial park because we can push through the expenses to the tenants. So I'm not sure why the solar was put only under the industrial park. They don't even take advantage. So I think for next year's budget, we should look at putting that somewhat across the board, some sort of a percentage of where it would go.
For OBPA accounts, not, that's, we benefit, all of our accounts benefit from the solar, the money, or the power generated from the solar product.
Under the airport, under the general expenses, there is no budget for legal expenses for the airport, and they had spent out of that general expenses for July, 32,000 of that belonged to legal.
Just so you know, where some of that was related to, some is related to some of the grant work we're doing for the 20 million and the capital, and then the other is related to earlier getting deferments, and we got a second round of deferments that they helped us accommodate, so that's kind of the reason for that, but they're all related to the airport.
And then if we go on to the actual versus budget, we can see that rental income is actually up overall, and that's mostly due to the industrial park being, at the end of July, fairly stable. Our fuel sales and fare charges we knew would be down. Port operating and rental fees are down a bit, but the wind turbine project is keeping us going. The difference on the port wind turbine project is simply timing. There was an awful lot of billing that happened in August. So I think that will change next month. Other income is over budget just a little bit, well, we've got a little bit more money, and that's due to the insurance proceeds. Our salaries and wages are down a bit. We didn't hire as many summer help. And we did not replace, no, he was a bridge person, correct? So we just,
No,
Yep.
that would be the other, right.
and as we mentioned before, the payroll taxes and benefits are below budget here, above budget on the other side. Interest expense is down for deferments. Again, maintenance expense, we're holding as much back as we possibly can. The wind turbine project is all timing, that we build as much as we could, as early as we could. Utilities and general expenses are continuing to be below budget. Our change in net assets before depreciation is still positive. If we didn't have the CARES Act, it would be negative at this point. The CARES Act, we haven't actually had to use quite as much as we thought we would, but we're covering all the expenses that we can, so we're happy with that. Any questions before we move on?
Not me.
When is the CARES Act money? Is that for the year or is that?
No, we have 4 years on the CARES Act, or when we expend it, whichever comes first. And we will not come anywhere close to the 4 years. My guess would be we will have it for no more than 18 months. On the statement of financial position or balance sheet, I would bring your attention to accounts receivable, even though that number looks quite high at 678. 163 of that is ship money, and 391,000 is from the windmill people, the Siemens Gamesa billing, bringing us to 554,000 of that 678 belongs to the windmill project. And it appears that we knew Siemens Gamesa was going out 60 days. We have a few of those billings that are now 61 to 90. And the ship billing appears to be going to the 60 days also, which we did not anticipate happening. The rest of our assets and our construction in progress are right on. Accounts payable is at 1.3, but if you look at the fact that we owe on the windmill project 195,000, and then we still owe 143 to the New York State retirement system. If you take those two extraordinary expenses out, our accounts payable is still below $1 million. And we are chipping away at that as furiously as we can. So as soon as some of this 554,000 comes in on receivables, we can knock out what we owe to OMLC and Auburn Crane for the windmill project. Any questions?
Dave, any question?
No, because you're doing a good job explaining it.
Thank you. So the next sheet that we sent out, I had a call from the Department of Budget asking us to compare March through August of 2019 to March through August of 2020 I know we are not the only person who received this, so I think the state offices are looking to see the position in which everyone finds themselves right now.
Mhm.
But I thought it might be good, so I asked Steve if we should let you see what we sent to them, just to get an understanding of where we are this year compared to last year during this time. And you'll notice almost all of it is well below what we did last year.
Mhm.
One thing to point out under other income, the bridge management fee border station. This has nothing to do with lack of money. When the lease was rewritten, we got rid of the management fees. It used to be that the border station paid both rent and management fees. When the new lease was written, we got rid of them. So that is not something that we quote-unquote lost. It is something that was taken out of the new lease.
Mhm.
Everything else is unfortunately just as it is, as far as not being able to collect the income that we did last year at this time.
Well, I was stricken by the drop-off in the airport parking revenue, which I know has been mentioned before, but I hadn't appreciated the magnitude. Or what it had generated apparently in previous years.
Is that, and is that our revenue or is that MAPCO's revenue?
Part of that would be MAPCO's, but it's ours too, but MAPCO does other things like janitorial and other that, so that would fund their operation. Whereas right now, we've got nothing, everything that they're doing janitorial wise or parking lot wise is being covered under the CARES Act, so there's no revenue supporting that at all right now. Yeah, and that 43, see, was, we were in good shape before COVID hit. I mean, passenger wise in January and February, and that's really 2.5 months worth.
Mhm.
We would have done quite well had we not
Yeah.
had to shut down. So overall, as the report shows, we are 1.3 behind where we were at this point last year.
Mhm. Well, I don't have any more questions, Patty. I think that I appreciate this report. It seems to me very significant. I think that comparisons to either the prior year or to budget are very much less significant. We're in such new ground that deviations in and of themselves, they don't trouble me. The thing that troubles me is maintaining operations at a level that's requisite as opposed to desirable, because we need to keep the bridge open, we need to keep the airport operating and so forth. And Steve, have you been maintaining contact with the State Department of Budget?
Yes, they're in on, we've gone bi-weekly now,
Yeah.
but they're in on, the Office of Budget is there, the DOT and the Governor's Office is in on those small budgets. We attended one.
Yes.
They canceled the next one, and then they moved to bi-weekly. So our next one is this Friday
This Friday.
at 10:30, 10 o'clock. So the part of that is I think they got overloaded with other things.
Well, I would think.
And unless, basically they said call if you've got emergency issues or anything, but
Sure.
we've been pretty level after we first were hit with everything. We've just kind of kept them informed. Then they seat all all of our board reports and all the agendas for the upcoming meetings, so they're pretty well in tune with everything there. But this one was on or above, this wasn't requested on one of the meetings. It could have, the genesis could have come out of that, but that was a request put into us separate from these meetings, so they must be looking just to get a good feel separately for income with a number of agencies or authorities.
Well, I would think people in the state are trying to figure out what do they do if Congress does not take action. And I have a friend who's on the school board in Morristown, and I believe that they're trying to figure out what they're gonna do with a 20% decrease in state aid. Everybody's got to be very hard-nosed, don't they?
Yeah, and we're careful in that we realize everybody's got the same issues.
Mhm.
So we don't want to overload the Albany or the state people with, for us. I mean, everybody's in the same.
Sure.
So we recognize that, and that helps not cloud the things anymore. They're probably overwhelmed with cries for help.
Well,
But we're not alone.
I keep wondering what their options are going to be. And I don't think I know the answers, but there are lots of interesting actions that are taken from time to time. Well, I appreciate that report. I think that item 2 is the summary of the budget office report. That's what you just covered, Patty?
Mhm.
That's correct.
And is there any more business on those before we move on to number 3?
That's very good.
Determination of surplus lands in the town of Pottstown. Steve, do you or John want to
John,
speak to this?
John kind of was talking a little bit with Dave on that, so let John kind of fill you in on where we are with that.
So back in July, early July, we had a request from an Amish family in the town of Pottstown that owns a farm, I guess, around a 45-acre piece of authority-owned property that's bound by their land, the Austin Ridge Road, and the NYOG, and wondered if we would be willing to sell it or to let them lease it for pasture purposes. So I went out, took a look at it, and on the Austin Ridge Road, there's homes here, and then it's a fairly, it's not flat. There's a drop off there. It's mostly good-sized cedar trees and scrub brush and things like that. The aerial that's attached, it looked like there was probably some water lying in the middle of it. I didn't want the whole thing. I just looked from the
I
road.
want to walk up and take a look at this because when I printed it, it wasn't clear after I printed it. I think it was my printer as opposed to the,
Yeah.
Nope, I had the same problem.
Yeah, so the Amish farm is here, and their land comes down, and so they own all this land here. This is the NYOG, this little stretch of
yeah.
frontage here, and then this is the Austin Ridge Road.
And why do you say that you think there's some water in it? I don't see.
A better image than that.
Okay, sure,
Sorry, and I don't have that one.
okay.
But it turns up that, it's not labeled wetlands like this,
Mm-hmm,
but it is wet.
yep.
Yep. And like I say, there's a pretty good drop off here as I drove down through. But it did look like there was, this area was all wet. Maybe it is this right here, I'm not sure.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, John, if I remember correctly, you were saying that you thought that the value might be less than the assessment.
Yeah, and that's just a rough estimate. Someone else can determine that, but like Dave, like tillable land is probably 1,000 an acre. so.
Depends on whether it's good tillable land or tiled and so forth, I mean, it'll go a couple thousand.
Then it can go higher than that, yeah. And this isn't, so that was just a,
Sure.
yeah, it was just
I would have to look at the soil types and stuff. Yeah, well, are we trying to sell it? I guess that's the,
that's how you folks have, I mean.
And wouldn't the procedure be?
Steve and I didn't even,
Wouldn't the procedure be an auction?
yeah.
yes. Yeah, it would be a public auction.
So lots of times, the value is what it sells for.
Right, we'd have to establish a minimum bid, I
So
assume.
you'd have, I guess that's what I was suggesting, you'd have a minimum bid at a lower value, but it may bid up higher.
Remind me, if you would, what the assessment is.
48,684.
And it's 45 acres?
Yes.
So if we set a minimum of at least half of it. Because I think that in the town of Macomb and the towns of Herman, in the town of Herman, that almost anything will sell for $400 an acre. I mean, it can be terrible.
That's right, virtually anything will sell for that.
And the, you know, if it's decent hunting land, it'll sell for 800 or 1,200. You know, beauty is in the eye. So if we set at least $500 or $600 an acre as our minimum, unless that's swamp, I don't know, the duck hunters are gonna be pretty interested if it's swamp. It's funny thing to see this stuff sell, especially if somebody's got a New Jersey address, the buyer does. And they think it's a bargain at $800 an acre.
So,
Anyway,
would that be your recommendation, like auction at?
So, what, do we have no use for that land, I guess?
No.
No, I talked to the NYOG and they, I don't think they were aware of it and, you know, they just heard 45 acres and they were like, well, you know, something might come along and that may be true, but I don't think it's a suitable site for any kind of a project or anything. So they weren't opposed to, not to selling up their land anyways, but.
Is it not suitable for solar? I don't know what the power situation is on the Austin Ridge Road without reminding myself of going back, but,
Yeah, I don't think there's any power line along the tracks there. And then I don't know, I traveled it before, but I never really thought of it in that way.
maybe we just don't drive down that road thinking about that, right? So, I don't know.
You say there's homes across from that, right? They're pretty nice homes.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, again, would somebody be interested in building, or would those people, some people
They may.
like the neighborhood and would just buy it just to have it for their own property?
In May, yeah.
I would think that the assessed value would probably be, it's probably a low value on what it's worth, but that's just my take on it.
You think the 48 is low?
It depends on what you can do with the land, but,
I don't know.
I just hate to see us put it up and sell it for half of that when it's probably worth it. I would assume we'd advertise it. I read in your note, I think, John, you talked about some real estate outfit to do it with, right? Maybe?
That was another matter, that was yeah.
Oh, that was a different one.
Yeah, we would just, I guess we would advertise, I mean, if you ultimately decide to sell it, we'd advertise it, probably in the newspapers and that, and, you know, hold a public auction, and people can come in and bid on it.
My sense is that assessed values are not usually high unless the assessor made a mistake. And sometimes the assessors do, because,
Especially if you're a public authority and you don't pay any taxes,
Right.
throw
True.
value at it.
that's right. But assessed values are based on looking at sales of land in the township. And probably that value that the assessor put on there is based on previous sales of somewhat similar land. And the question is, did the assessor actually take into account maybe that there's more swamp there than there is good tillable land? But if the assessor didn't make a mistake, the values are not gonna be too high. The assessor doesn't wanna have fights. And so they don't try to put aggressive values on them. They'd go at 90% of what they think is right, 85% of what they think is right. Because that way they don't have as many arguments. So I think that,
I struggle, let's just say it brings half the value.
Yeah.
I struggle with what 24,000 will do for us.
mhm.
It's 24,000, within the big scope of things, it's really a drop in the bucket. So I don't think we gain anything by getting rid of it. Unless, that's just my take on it.
Why don't we forward this to the board
Yeah,
without a committee recommendation? I'd be game to sell it, but I don't wanna sell it for less than market. Or not a lot less than market.
Okay.
I don't think we need a fire sale, that's, I
Right.
guess,
That's
my
what-
opinion.
Yeah, and I guess the thought was, you know, it's a public auction, so, you know, that'll determine the value, but I think maybe, yeah, if you wanted to start out at the actual assessed value, then, if it doesn't sell, you have a second public auction or lower that.
Yep,
Sounds good?
forward it to the board for discussion. You need a motion for that?
Let's,
I would move that we do that.
and I'll second that. And all in favor?
Aye.
Steve, what's this item, broker online marketing?
Yeah, that's, John wanted to come to, well, I asked him to come to the board with this. There's 3 properties and there's, and I think he can explain it better, but.
Oh, in fact, now I remember, I
Yeah.
did read the.
So I'll let John, kind
Oh,
of
that
walk
might
you
be
through
what I
that.
was reading, sorry.
Yep, yep. Yeah, like, LoopNet and CoStar are online commercial real estate marketplaces. And like CoStar gets about 7 million monthly visits. And people, brokers especially, and landowners, but generally brokers, list their buildings and land for lease or sale on those sites, and it generates leads. We had 3 properties on there at one time. John Morrison, who was here, worked on that. And I think we did get some leads off of them, nothing that materialized, no actual contract, but there was, you know, general interest. And it's, you know, it's much more far-reaching than our other marketing efforts because it is internet-based, and someone in New York City or California can read it. So we stopped doing that because they started charging a fee, and we can't get any inquiries through it. So while I update them and that, I can't get the inquiries. So the cost for like 3 listings for a year is like $2,700. So our broker that we had hired before, we had gone to RFP, Meyer Real Estate LLC, because they deal with so many properties, they have unlimited ability to put as many sites and properties on there as they want with their contract with CoStar. So one option would be to turn that over to her to list 3 or 4 of our properties for us and complement the other marketing efforts that we do. There's no upfront cost in terms of a contract with CoStar. There's no cost with her. She gets paid on a commission if something happens, if she generates a lead and we actually get a rental agreement or sell a piece of land. And she's typically commercial rental agreements with the broker, you get 10% every year on that lease for as long as that tenant is there. But she's agreed to a one-time 10% commission. She's agreed to co-broke it so that any broker can come in and get half the commission and she'd get the other half. So you're opening up not just to her, but all the other realtors in the area if they have somebody.
Do you have thoughts, Dave?
Yes, but I'm forming them. I don't know. Um, What's the downside here? The commission.
I don't think there is. I mean, yeah, you're gonna lose some on commission. I mean, you're not gonna lose it because you don't have it. So I don't think there is a downside. And you're saving the upfront costs of, you know, your listing and fees with CoStar and LoopNet. And it broadens our marketing efforts. You know, we could do it for a year and see what kind of inquiries we get.
Steve, do you want to offer advice or comment before?
Just, I think long-term, it's not a bad idea, but, you'd have to decide what properties that we come to you that you want to lease or sell or anything. So, in effect, this would be, you'd be applying this agreement to things that the board decided. So, I like it in that, we can't afford any more bills.
Mhm.
And you know, if things were more normal and we had reserves, probably be simpler for us to control that and go, would